people can make opinions that might not be the right opinions based on what you wear. A lot of people get on the idea of I'm going to work on this, a bit like the gym in the new year. I think a lot of people are scared of LinkedIn. If you didn't have a website 15 years ago, people were like, why not? It's got to be who you are, or you're making a very difficult path for yourself going forward, because you can't sustain that.
And welcome to Trade of Thought, a TEXUB initiative. I am your host Akansha Anil, and today we have a very special guest with us. Kelly Lundberg is a renowned best-selling author, award-winning entrepreneur, TEDx speaker, and a former celebrity stylist. She helps entrepreneurs grow their personal brand and achieve maximum financial return. We are so glad to have you on our show today, Kelly.
Pleasure. I look forward to sharing some value today.
So before we begin and get into the nitty-gritties of personal branding, I would love to know about your journey, and I'm sure the viewers would also love to know about it. While I have read about it, why don't we hear it in your words?
Yeah, and I was listening to all the sort of different hats that I've worn when you were saying she's this and she's that, but I've been in business a long time, so more than 20 years. I've been running my own business, I've started businesses, I've sold businesses, they've always been service-based businesses. But what originally brought me to the Middle East was I was cabin crew, so when I was very young, excited to escape Scotland and the Scottish weather, and it was just a great opportunity to travel the world. And when you weren't quite sure about which direction you wanted to go, Dubai was an exciting place. It still is an exciting place, but certainly in 2000, 2001, 2002, there was just so many opportunities. So I'd only been here a couple of years and then saw this gap in the market and launched my first business. So that was a personal styling and shopping agency. So that was really my path into public image, how people present themselves, first impressions, how they come across, and actually how what you wear can actually affect, or people can make opinions that might not be the right opinions based on what you wear. So that was kind of really my first foray into kind of personal branding. And I had that business for 15 years, and then I sold it and really honed in on personal brand strategy, because actually it goes way beyond personal style. It is the style of your brand and your website, so the style continues in that space, but there's also how do you present yourself on stage? How are you getting more visibility? How are you building your credibility? Are you winning awards? Are you contributing to articles and media? And all of that affects your digital presence. When someone Googles you, are you who you say you are? And the opinion that people will make on that as well. So that's a little shorted, edited version.
So why don't you tell me about the first client you had?
First styling client or in personal brand?
Personal brand.
First personal branding. First personal branding client was actually a female entrepreneur who'd been in business quite a while, but actually hadn't focused on her own personal brand. So had been building her business, which is something that I come up against quite a lot, where people hide themselves behind or within their business and are very reluctant to put themselves out there. But she knew that in order to grow her credibility and visibility, that she had to put herself out there. And an opportunity presented itself where she was giving her first TEDx talk. And she knew that I had already done a TEDx talk, and it was at the time where I sold my styling agency, but growing the personal branding and speaking and having a TEDx opportunity is a great way to build your credibility. So she asked me to work with her and help her, and that was the start of growing her personal brand. So I think some people think, it's just if you're an entrepreneur that you should be working on your personal brand, but many of our clients are within the corporate sector and really just having to stand out in their own space amongst their peers. If you want promotion, it's not enough to just sit and expect that you'll get promotion and people will notice what you're doing. So the diversity of the clients now is quite big, versus when I first started it was just entrepreneurs.
So I was looking through your website and I saw some interesting words that you used to describe yourself. Dream nurturer and goal grabber. Can you share how this fits into your mission?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I would say certainly the goal grabber, as anyone who knows me, I'm like the goal queen. I really set goals several times a year, whether it's the start of the year, the new season, at any point where I feel, okay, start of the month, and I go out and I say I'm going to achieve them. And there's very few goals that I haven't achieved or that have maybe taken a little bit longer, but have still achieved them. So I think it's very much my personal brand is always something that I want to inspire other people to do, and I think achieving goals or setting goals and trying to reach them, because sometimes the path changes and you don't want that goal in the end, but along the way an opportunity has presented itself and it's like, wow, I didn't kind of expect that. So I would say that's very much fits into sort of my my ethos of who I'm all about, and the dreams. Even in my first book I said, dream big. It's all about, what is it that you want to do, and then you can go and do that. And I genuinely believe that from a young age. There's been very few things that I've gone, okay, this is what I want to do, and I've gone, right, okay, I don't know how to maybe do it, but I've started to create momentum, and the first step will help you get there. So it's all things that are really true to me, but things that I try and inspire my clients as well.
So beautifully put, and it's so important that you practice these things in your life, and then it becomes much more easier for you to then make it a business and then teach it to your clients. So, they say practice what you preach, and you have so beautifully incorporated it in your business and hence made it a practice to teach someone else. So, now let's move into the personal branding space. In today's landscape, it is so important to have your own personal identity, as you want to stand out from your peers as well as your competition. So, can you tell us something about how important it is for business leaders today to have their own personal brand?
Well, I think sort of post the pandemic, there was very much an understanding that you can work anywhere in the world, you can connect with anyone. The space became, or the environment, or the culture even became much smaller. So I think, maybe when you were competing with, colleagues in here, no, you're not. It's a much bigger space. Could be London, it could be Singapore, and the same in an entrepreneurial environment. Maybe your clients just won't buy from here, they'll be from all around the world. So I think that in itself has pushed the concept of personal branding much more. It's been around for ages.
Yes.
Many years. But I think combine that with digital, the social media presence and digital presence, because they're separate. You've got your digital, which is not just social media, it's articles that you write, it's other contributions, it's people featuring you, versus social media is content that you're putting out. And I think certainly with social media and the vast number of channels within the last 10 years that have grown, it's very much like, if you didn't have a website 15 years ago, people were like, why not? Whereas now, is if you don't have a social media presence, and it's like, well, what's wrong? What are you hiding? What's happening? And then I often equate it to going on a blind date. I say to certainly when I'm in a master class and in a group setting, I say to people, what if you were to go on a blind date? The chances are you'd probably research the person's name beforehand and see on Google if anything comes up. And people always agree with me. And then I say, well, what happens when you can't find anything? And then people go, they go, okay, but scary, sketchy, what are they hiding? And that's no different in business. Now, I understand that there's people that want to have very private profiles, and in certain industries that works. But if you're in an environment where it's very competitive, then I think even more so, if you want to stand out and become a market leader or become someone in leadership, you need to lead from the top, and having a personal brand is imperative for that.
Yes. Absolutely. And in the past 10 years, the way social media has grown and how it has opened avenues for people to be known worldwide. For example, if somebody is famous in Dubai, now they have an opportunity to be known all around the world. And I think that's very interesting. So, one thing that I feel that business leaders struggle with is that they find it very difficult to separate their identity from their brand, that is their self identity with from the brand value. So can you share, can you suggest ways in which they can separate the two?
I don't necessarily think they should, because I think, as a personal brand, that's personal.
Yeah.
So and for many people, the reason that you're in the job that you're in, or the reason that you own the business that you're in, is very much because it's something that you enjoy doing, or it's part of who you are, or you love helping people, or you want to inspire someone to do this, or you want to change the way and make the way that people buy this much easier.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a fine line between being very different to what your business brand is, because I think you are your business brand. Everything in my business is who I am. And in my personal space, I share even more of the personal things, because as much as people think they maybe don't want to hear personal things, that's where the relatability is. That's where people can understand, oh, this is what this person's all about. And the more that you keep things close to your chest, it can give the wrong impression. Are they guarded? What are they hiding? All these things back to first impressions. So I would be reluctant in being someone that you're not, because at the end of the day, it's about authenticity, and you can't stop being who you are or make something different. It's got to be who you are, or you're making a very difficult path for yourself going forward, because you can't sustain that.
So for business leaders, what challenges have they come to you with in terms of their personal branding?
Well, I think, as much as you're saying, what do people do and how do they differentiate? I think people getting clear on what is their personal brand. What do they stand for? Words to describe themselves, and how do potentially they see themselves, and how do other people perceive themselves? Because some people think that they're one way, and in actual fact, their colleagues or their peers think that they're very different. I do often find people think that it's for outgoing people, and I hear this a lot, that it's I'm reserved, or I'm quiet by nature, so I therefore don't have a personal brand. But I think the key piece is people understanding that everyone has a personal brand, and then understanding what is a personal brand. So my interpretation of a personal brand is this amalgamation of your on and offline persona. Because people think it's just social media. Sure, that's one part of it, but it's your persona on and offline. That first impression. How do you make people feel when they come into contact with something that you see, that they see, that you do, they feel? How do you treat them? All of that is your personal brand. So everyone has one. It's just they might not have an active strategy. Certainly in the digital space, they might not have an active strategy within the workplace to be able to grow that.
So it's so interesting to think about that every way that we exist, we are sort of our own personal brand. It's not that we are trying to be a personal brand or are trying to behave a certain way, but everything that we do sort of reflects on ourselves, and at the end it creates a perception. So over time, as you've seen on social media now, brands are trying to create a personality. They have tried to humanize themselves. So and how important do you think is it for people today to also humanize themselves, because people are becoming brands and brands are becoming people? So how do you create that segregation when you're posting on social media?
Well, I think nothing will ever take away from a person sharing content. So I understand very much the drive towards humanizing business brands, but nothing will ever detract from a person sharing a thought leadership piece rather than a business. And the stats are all out there versus a person sharing something or a business. It's always much more absorbed. In fact, a message on social media is 24 more times absorbed if it's shared by a person rather than the actual business itself. And it can be about the business, but the humanizing of people, really. And I think on a whole, companies should not be scared to empower their employees to build their personal brand, because at the end of the day, they're ambassadors. They're the ones that are representing the company. They're the ones that the clients are coming to, the business is done with. So therefore, it's not an area of threat, it's an area of opportunity and connection and growth.
That is such a great insight that you said that employees are the brand ambassadors for the company, and I totally agree, because even if the employee is leaving in a few years, and companies are usually worried about the rate of rate in which employees quit their jobs, or how quickly they leave the company, things like that. But I think that companies should focus on providing that value and that growth opportunity for each employee, because no matter what, they're still going to be part of that employee's journey. So, even now when I come across some people, they mention that, that one company where I had an opportunity to learn, to grow, and that was like a turning point in my life. And I think companies should focus on that. So now I would like to go back to personal branding. We discussed how the business leader also needs to work on his personal branding. The employees also need to work on their personal branding. Can you tell me how different would their strategies be when they are trying to improve or work on their personal brand?
No, because the strategies, when I work with clients, it's always personal to an individual, because each person has their own story. Yeah. Each person has their own content pillars that they feel confident enough to talk about. So I think the differentiation is much more down to the person rather than the overall strategy of what are we doing. At the end of the day, it's showcasing who you are. The leadership, they might have, there's just different content pillars that they're talking about that's of interest to them and the position they're in, versus where does the employee want to be going in the next 2 to 3 years. Then that's the roles or the thought leadership pieces that they want to be contributing to as well. So I wouldn't say that there's a massive difference in that.
So could you share a piece of advice for a business leader who's just starting out on their journey of creating their personal brand and their business?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are scared of LinkedIn, which I find quite fascinating. A lot of people go on LinkedIn and they just look and they don't actually do anything, or they'll repost something, or they think it's just for finding a job. So whilst LinkedIn isn't a new trend, the way people are viewing it and how the platform operates is very different to what people think it is. So from a leadership perspective, from becoming a thought leader, LinkedIn is one of the easiest places that you can start to build connections online and offline, because you can meet afterwards, sharing your opinions and your views. And a lot of people think that, okay, as long as I post on LinkedIn once a week, but if you want to grow that platform, you should be looking at 4 to 5 times a week, and building, not just reposting other people's stuff. It's coming up with your own thing. So I would say very much that. I will say that there's a trend in websites, so owning your own domain name, because that's your IP. You can monetize your personal brand out with just your business, or without, in addition to an employee. So owning your own domain name, your children's domain names, and having that as a landing page, because that place can then become, evolves with you and changes as you're looking for jobs, as you're growing in business. So that would be another thing I would think about.
Even on LinkedIn, I've noticed that people are so afraid of commenting. Like you very rightly mentioned, they mostly only repost. And the importance of having your own domain name also. It reminds me of the story that you shared on a podcast recently about how you had to fight for your domain. So can you share that story with our viewers, because I'm sure they would love to hear it from you.
So I found out sort of maybe 15-20 years ago, when I started working with luxury brands, they didn't want to work with a business, they only wanted to work with a person. And I think more and more, again, you're talking about the humanizing, the personal piece, it is very much that people want to work with people and not just businesses. So when they asked me to send my collateral, it was very much, can you send Kelly Lundberg, not my old business. And that's when I was like, oh, okay, I don't have anything. So I went to buy my domain name in 2009, and it was actually already gone. The .com was gone. So Kelly Lundberg is not a particularly common name either. Well, certainly wasn't 20 years ago. And And yeah, so I hired a broker to try and find the who owned it, to maybe someone hadn't done anything with it and would they sell it to me, and he refused, because I actually found out who owned it. But when he explained why he wouldn't sell it to me, I thought it was quite sweet, and it was because he had a daughter named Kelly Lundberg and was keeping it as a legacy and as a platform for her. So I often joke that I was then frustrated with my own parents as why did they not have the foresight to buy my own domain name. I don't even think they'd know what a domain name is. So yeah, I then went and bought what other people were advising me were a trend then was go.co, because that's the next big thing that's going to take off. And it didn't. And when I went to America and I spent time as a celebrity stylist there, people genuinely thought that I had made a mistake on my business card and added an M, and my emails weren't actually getting to me. And then I went to the UK and they added .uk onto the end of it, and this isn't working. So that's when I went to consistently change all my handles. So Kelly Lundberg Official became my Instagram, it became my LinkedIn, it became everything. And that's when I bought the domain name kellylundbergofficial.com. So there is continuity through all my platforms, and Twitter, or now X, is the only one that it's not that, because it's too long.
Yeah. That was such an interesting story, and your entire journey through finding your own domain name. So people watching, if you still haven't locked your domain name, let this be a cautionary tale for you to lock your domain name. I want to go into the future a little bit, and with the emergence of social media and all these different platforms and the era of influencers that we're seeing today, can you tell me how do you think personal branding is going to look like 10 years later?
I think it's going to constantly evolve, because I think as people we evolve. So it's what kind of content are you sharing? I think that's the big thing over the next 10 years. It's going very much from, oh, I'm working with this person, I'm doing this, to it's all about driving value and content at the moment. How can I support people? How can I help people? Because in turn then they'll eventually become clients, or you develop a rapport with them. So I would say the content piece is what's going to change the most over the next 10 years when it comes to personal branding. And more people are going to own their domain names. More people are going to become much more comfortable with, this is my business, but this is my personal brand. I sold my business, but my personal brand has always stayed me. Yeah. And that's the thing, that as you continue to evolve, that will always stay who you are. But everything else can change.
So what is the formula that you believe in when it comes to helping people with their personal brand?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And when I came up with this formula, it was actually like a Steve Jobs quote that says, it's not until you look back that you can join the dots. And that's where then the foundations for the 7 S's, what I call my formula, the Brand You formula, became a really clear system, because they're all the steps that I followed, and then they're all the steps that I now work with clients. And it doesn't necessarily have to be exactly in the order, but it keeps them right in thinking personal branding is more than just social media. Yeah. So I always say we start with the strategy. Where are you now with your personal brand? What happens when you Google yourself, and get really clear on sort of what those goals are, what's your message, your elevator pitch. All of that becomes the very first pillar in the Brand You formula strategy. Then it moves on to style. So before you get to the point of where you're posting content, or you're speaking, or presenting yourself, what is your personal style? Yeah. So in the way that you dress, your communication, even in the style of your logo, your brand name. How do you want to come across when someone sees it? What's the first opinion you want people to think about? Then you move into stationery. So taking the style into stationery, it's not necessarily pens, but it's actually all your collaterals. Because once you've got the vibe of what does my logo look like, what is my style, how do I come across, how do I want to be seen, then that needs to be translated into social media graphics, your photography, your website, your business cards. Then you've really got the foundations to then be posting content on social media. So that then becomes the next pillar in the brand G formula. Which platforms are you on? You don't need to be on all of them. You just need to be on ones that you can actually manage consistently, and that's always the advice I give. From there, it's spotlight. So the spotlight is, how do you get the spotlight on you? As much as you might be uncomfortable with that, that's where the connection and the relatability is. So that's looking at media publications, PR opportunities, space where you can, like this, people can learn about your skill set and potentially become clients or become a follower and then eventually become a client. And then you have speaking. So I really do believe that this is one of the strongest ways to position yourself as someone who is credible, who is a thought leader, because not everyone is comfortable speaking. And I always believe it's the little things that set you apart that will help you stand out. So speaking is one area that I love working with clients and helping them build the confidence to host their first masterclass or speak up in a meeting or host an Instagram live or a LinkedIn live or launch their own podcast. So all of those opportunities then help with their confidence in speaking and conveying their message. And then the final pillar is, how do you stand out? So that's where the small details really have the big impact. Are you focused on sustainability within your personal brand? Because I think at some point everyone should be. Are you giving back within your personal brand? Are you applying for awards? Have you written a book? Like, what are the things that are going above and beyond other people within your area, your niche? That's where you can stand out.
That is very, very interesting and so insightful, and I'm sure that anybody who's watching our show today can learn from you, and I'm sure they can come to your website and of course reach out to you directly and learn from that. As we wrap up, is there anything else that you would like to share with our listeners on the impact and the importance of personal brand?
I think it's just understanding that you have a personal brand, and that mindset shift of going, well, just because I don't work on it means I don't have one. You do. So understanding that you do have a personal brand, I think, would be the biggest takeaway from today's show.
Thank you, Kelly, so much for being a part of our show, and I'm sure the viewers watching are going back wiser and much more personal branding aware than they were before they started watching this video. We had an absolutely great time having you with us. Thank you for watching Trail of Thought. Please don't forget to like, share and subscribe to our channel so that you're notified every time we post a new video. Bye!